Sarah had always believed in the simplicity of her life. A devoted wife and mother, her world revolved around her 13-year-old son, Evan, and her supportive husband, Mark. They lived in a cozy suburban home where every day seemed predictable and steady. Sarah worked part-time as an office manager, a job that allowed her to balance her family life and career. Yet beneath the surface of this perfect life, Sarah often felt a yearning, a desire for something more, though she couldn't quite define it. Her days were filled with routine, driving Evan to school, making dinner for her family, tending to the house, and texting with her friends. But, as much as Sarah loved her family, there was a part of her that missed the spontaneity of youth, the excitement of new connections, and the thrill of feeling truly seen. It was late one evening when Sarah decided to browse through social media. She hadn't updated her profile picture in years, and with a bit of free time on her hands, she snapped a picture of herself standing in the garden, the soft sunlight reflecting in her eyes. She wasn't looking for anything, just a little change to her online presence. The photo was innocent enough. She wasn't trying to be seductive, just natural. She didn't even consider the possibility that someone might take it the wrong way. Sarah uploaded the picture and went about her evening, helping Evan with his homework and chatting with Mark about their day. The next day, something unusual happened. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had sent her a friend request. Sarah didn't recognize the name. Daniel Smith, the profile said. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted the request, thinking maybe it was a friend of a friend. Almost immediately, Sarah received a message from Daniel. "Hi, Sarah. I couldn't help but notice your picture. You have a very warm and inviting smile. You seem like someone who has a lot of love to give." Sarah paused, feeling an odd sensation in her chest. It wasn't that she hadn't received compliments before, but this one was different. There was something about the way he spoke that made her feel seen, truly seen. She replied, trying to remain casual. "Thanks. It's just a photo from my garden." "I'm sure it's more than just a photo," he responded. "There's something about you, something that draws people in." Sarah felt an unexpected rush of emotion. She had always prided herself on being self-assured, but there was something about Daniel's words that made her question the monotony of her own life. His compliments were kind, and his messages seemed so genuine. Over the next few days, they exchanged more messages. Nothing too intimate at first, just small talk. Over time, the messages grew deeper. Daniel told Sarah about his life, his struggles, and his dreams. He shared stories about his work, his travels, and his longing to connect with someone who truly understood him. In return, Sarah began opening up about her own life, sharing small details she hadn't thought about in years. She spoke about Evan, about her husband, and about her longing for something more than the routine that had taken over her life. "Do you ever feel like you're just going through the motions?" Sarah wrote to him one evening. "Like there's more to life, but you're too afraid to reach for it?" Daniel responded quickly. "I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes we get so caught up in the responsibilities that we forget to nurture ourselves. But I can tell you're a beautiful soul, Sarah. You deserve to feel valued beyond your roles as a wife and mother." Her heart skipped a beat. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. From that moment, Sarah started looking forward to Daniel's messages. His words filled a void she hadn't even realized existed. Every text felt like a secret treasure, and the more they talked, the more Sarah felt drawn to him. She started to smile more, her heart fluttering when she saw his name appear on her screen. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of work, Sarah found herself lying in bed with her phone in hand. It was past midnight, and Mark was already asleep beside her. Her son, Evan, was tucked in his bed, but Sarah couldn't sleep. She opened her messages and saw Daniel had left a new one. "You're always on my mind," it read. "I just wanted you to know that." Sarah felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She knew she shouldn't respond, knew that this was beginning to cross a line, but the temptation was too strong. She replied, her fingers trembling, "I don't know why, but I feel the same way." And just like that, the door to something dangerous had opened. Daniel's response was immediate. "You have no idea how happy it makes me to hear you say that. I think about you all the time, Sarah. I can't help it." They continued talking well into the night, their conversation more intimate now. Daniel spoke about his feelings, about the way Sarah's words had affected him. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was emotional, something that transcended the boundaries of normal conversation. He made Sarah feel special, made her feel wanted in a way that she hadn't felt in years. As the days passed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that what she was doing was wrong. She loved Mark, and she was proud of the life they had built together. Evan needed her, and she couldn't risk destroying their family. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Daniel. She began spending more time on her phone, sneaking away to chat with him during the day, and feeling an increasing sense of guilt every time she saw her family. One evening, Mark noticed Sarah's distant behavior. "Hey, is everything okay?" he asked, sitting down beside her on the couch. Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just tired, I guess." Mark didn't push. He was busy with work, and they had been in a comfortable routine for years, but deep down, Sarah knew something was slipping, and she wasn't sure how to stop it. After weeks of messaging, Daniel suggested they meet in person. Sarah's heart raced at the thought. She knew it was a bad idea, but the thought of seeing him in real life was almost too tempting to resist. They agreed to meet at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Sarah told herself it would be just a casual meeting, nothing more than an opportunity to put a face to the name. But as she drove to the cafe, her stomach twisted with anxiety and excitement. She hadn't felt this way in years. When she arrived, Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table. He stood up as she approached, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. He was even more handsome in person, with piercing blue eyes and a warm smile that made her heart flutter. They talked for hours, sharing more about their lives and their feelings. Daniel's words were like honey, smooth and intoxicating. Sarah felt herself falling deeper into his web with every passing minute. It wasn't long before they both realized the connection between them had crossed from emotional to physical. The days following their meeting were a blur. Sarah knew she was on the brink of losing everything, but she couldn't bring herself to stop. Her conversations with Daniel grew more passionate, and their bond deepened in ways that terrified her. It wasn't long before the cracks in her marriage began to show. Mark noticed her distraction, her distance, and their once happy home felt colder than it ever had. Evan, too, began to sense something was off, though he couldn't understand what. Finally, one evening, Mark confronted her. "Sarah, what's going on? You've been different lately. Is there someone else?" The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Sarah's heart broke as she realized how far she had fallen. But the truth was, she didn't know how to stop. The days after Mark's confrontation were filled with tension, and Sarah felt like she was living in a fog. The guilt gnawed at her insides, but it was impossible to deny the pull she felt toward Daniel. Every moment they spent together, whether through texts, phone calls, or the brief meeting they shared, had created a bond that felt unbreakable. It wasn't just physical attraction anymore. It was as though Daniel had unlocked a part of her she didn't even know existed. He understood her, listened to her, and made her feel like she was truly seen for the first time in years. Despite knowing that her marriage was slowly crumbling, Sarah found herself reaching out to Daniel more and more. They spoke about everything: her fears, her desires, her frustrations with her marriage, and her yearning for a life outside of the confines she had built for herself. With every message, it felt like the walls she had carefully constructed around herself were breaking down. One evening, Mark noticed something that he hadn't before. Sarah's face was different. distant, lost in thought. She was sitting across from him at the dinner table, but it was as though she wasn't really there. Evan was talking about a school project, but Sarah's mind wasn't on him or the conversation. It was on Daniel. Finally, Mark put down his fork, his voice heavy. "Sarah, I need to know the truth. You've been distant. Something's not right. I can see it in your eyes." Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but found that no words came out. Her mind raced, torn between the man she had loved for years and the man who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Mark's eyes softened, though his tone remained firm. "Is there someone else? I deserve to know." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she realized she could no longer keep the secret. "Yes," she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "There's someone. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Mark stared at her, his face a mixture of disbelief and sadness. The weight of her confession hung in the air like a dark cloud, and for a moment the world felt suspended in time. "You're in love with him, aren't you?" Mark's voice cracked as the realization hit him. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "I never expected this. I never wanted to feel this way." Mark stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back so hard it clattered against the floor. "How long has this been going on?" he demanded. "Months," Sarah replied, barely able to hold back the tears. "I didn't mean for it to get this far, but every time I talk to him, it's like I can breathe again. I felt so alone, Mark. You don't see me anymore. You don't hear me." Mark's expression darkened, his face tightening with anger and hurt. "And I'm supposed to just accept that? That you've been talking to some stranger, pouring your heart out to him while I've been here, trying to keep our family together?" "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I just felt like I was drowning." Mark shook his head slowly, tears welling in his eyes. "Sarah, I don't even know who you are anymore. You've been slipping away from me for so long, and I didn't even see it. I thought we were happy." "We were," Sarah said desperately. "We were, but I wasn't happy. I didn't know how to tell you. I don't know how to fix this." Mark didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Sarah sitting there broken and lost. Evan, hearing the raised voices, peeked into the room, his face filled with concern. Sarah wiped her tears away, trying to put on a brave face for her son, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The days that followed were agonizing for Sarah. Mark moved into the guest room, and the distance between them grew more pronounced with each passing hour. There was no pretending anymore. The facade of a happy family had cracked, and Sarah felt the weight of it all crashing down on her. She continued to speak with Daniel in secret, their conversations growing more intimate, as if they were trying to fill the emptiness Sarah now felt in her own home. Daniel became her escape. His words offered a fleeting sense of warmth and understanding that she couldn't find in her marriage. But even as she felt herself drawn to him, a new sense of guilt began to rise within her. She had always prided herself on being a loving mother and a devoted wife, but now she had shattered both roles. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in the living room, staring blankly at the TV, Mark came in and sat beside her. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to fix this, Sarah," he said softly. "You've chosen him. I can see it in your eyes. You've already made your decision." "I haven't," Sarah replied, but even to her own ears the words felt hollow. She couldn't deny it anymore. She had fallen into something with Daniel that she couldn't control, something that felt deeper than any fleeting connection. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I love you, Sarah. I always have. But if you don't want this, if you don't want us, then I can't keep pretending. I deserve someone who wants to be here. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but she couldn't speak. She had no words to offer him, no way to take back what had been done. She had been so consumed by the attention and validation Daniel provided that she hadn't realized the destruction it would cause. The emotional connection she had with him had become an obsession, and it had clouded her judgment in ways that now felt impossible to reverse. Mark stood up, his face etched with pain. I'm not going to fight for something that's already gone, Sarah. I'm done. And just like that, the last thread holding her marriage together snapped. Mark walked out of the room, leaving Sarah sitting alone, the silence of the house pressing down on her. Her heart ached, not only for the love she had lost, but also for the future she had destroyed. The days after Mark moved out were a blur of confusion and regret. Sarah tried to focus on Evan, but it was hard to ignore the weight of her actions. Her relationship with Daniel, once a source of excitement and escape, now felt suffocating. The promises he had made to her, about starting anew, about being the man she had been waiting for, seemed empty now. She realized that Daniel, too, was a stranger, just another person she had sought validation from to fill the emptiness inside. She didn't know who she was anymore. She had sacrificed the stability of her family, her marriage, and her self-respect for a fleeting connection. She felt like she had lost everything. One evening, as she sat alone in the quiet house, staring at the empty space Mark had once filled, she made the difficult decision to end things with Daniel. She could no longer allow herself to hide behind the illusion that he was the answer to her unhappiness. She texted him, her hands shaking as she typed the message. I can't do this anymore. I need to focus on myself, on healing. I can't keep running away from the life I've broken. When Daniel's reply came hours later, it was cold and indifferent, as if he had known this moment was inevitable. But for Sarah, it was the first step toward reclaiming herself, toward facing the consequences of her choices. The road ahead would be long, and the pain of losing Mark would never fully fade. But Sarah knew one thing for certain. She had to start over, not with someone else, but with herself.